Start with a add tool, 2 by 2, and just stack it up twice, so 4 high in total. Then take your line tool. I'm going to switch colors just so it's clearer, and draw on the sides. Now, if you're having trouble aligning it, just check you don't have grid mode on. That's the V key. And that will snap it to a grid the size of your cursor, so that can sometimes make it do weird things. So I've just drawn from the top down to there. Now I'm going to take another color again and just paint one voxel of it. Now you can see as I drew that slope, that voxel got kind of stretched. It's actually now too high, whereas a normal voxel, if I paint over here, that would be what it started out as. But that's exactly what I need. One note of caution, voxels can vary in behavior slightly depending on the direction that you're facing. So if you don't get this nice clean result, try on another side. And I'll actually demonstrate quickly here. If I had done it on this side and I go to paint, oh no, that's fine. Let's try this side. Oh, it's totally behaving itself today. Well, sometimes you can get weird results, so if you do, just be aware of that. Just do it on a different side. Yep, no, it's totally behaving itself now, of course. Sometimes you can get a weird diagonal shape. All right, so you have this shape. I'm going to copy it, and now I've got a wedge that's 1 wide, 2 high. I'm going to put just some normal voxels down in 2 different colors, heck, even 3 different colors, just so we can see what happens to them when I paste this wedge beside them. So paste it that way, and you can see what happens is it's forcing the bottom voxel to be stretched up to meet the full side of its neighbor voxel, because all voxels always need to touch their neighbors. And if I do that on this side too, the same thing happens. So now this center voxel, and let me paint this in plaster to be more clear, the center voxel here is now too high, and the one that was right above it is squished almost paper thin. And this one up top is normal. Yeah, we'll delete that because we don't need it. So what I've got now is I've got this voxel, which is normal 1 by 1 in the sideways dimensions, but it's 2 voxels high vertically, and then this voxel, which is almost 0 height. Now I can use this voxel, and you'll notice that even though it appears to be too high, I still have to select it from the bottom, which is where the game really thinks it is. That's where it started. It was just stretched to look taller, but as far as the game is concerned, it's still down here. So I select that, paste, and I'm gonna paste it up in the air, and I'll actually just paint that black so we can see what's happening as I then paste the exact same voxel 1 down here. So this was our original 2 high voxel. The game thinks it's there, and it's pasted it underneath this voxel. The black voxel, the game originally thought was here, and of course it still does because the voxel just doesn't move itself. However, we have pasted this other voxel over it. So now the black voxel visually appears to be only up here, but the game still thinks it's here. In other words, if we copy what looks like this middle square, what we're actually going to copy is the black guy. And you still select that black voxel by using the select tool helps. By clicking underneath it, that is where the game actually thinks that voxel is. And this is what's often called an offset voxel. Offset because it's offset from where the game actually thinks it is. It visually appears to be higher. There are a couple of different ways to make these. That's one way. You can also use the inside angle shaped block There are probably other techniques as well. There's no one right way, whichever you find easiest. Some may give you very slightly more precise results than others. I like this just because it's very quick and easy. All right, so what do we do with this thing now? Well, we can copy it and paste it and make micro versions of it as well. There's a couple ways of doing this as well. Oops. Did you see what just happened when I pasted that above the ground? Even though it looks as if there's a space between this voxel and the ground, it still pulls the ground upwards. That's because even though it looks to us as if we're pasting it where the black voxel visually is, the game really thinks it's in the square below, which is adjacent to the ground. That's where the game thinks it is, even though visually it appears to be there to us. So that's why that's happening, because neighboring voxels always have to touch, and the game believes that this, well, the game knows it is a neighboring voxel. It is. All right, so I can paste this 2 above the ground and it'll be fine. And if I want to make this into a microvoxel, there's a couple ways. One way is just to use a smooth tool, just like you would a normal microvoxel. So I'm just going to paint a little dot on the ground underneath where it is, and I'm actually going to, oops, I'm also going to place another normal voxel somewhat above where it is, just so now visually I've got a line so I know exactly where that offset voxel is, because when I smooth it, it's going to vanish. So I hit my smooth tool, I can hold down my my F key to smooth it more gently if I want, or I can just use a normal click to smooth it more severely. If I wanted to make every gradient, I would want to use the F key to do every possible variation. For this tutorial, I'll just do a click. You notice when I clicked, that vanished in the middle, and I have this weird little artifact left here, but basically I can't see it. Now, that's why it's useful to have these markers here. I know where it should be. It should be right here, as far as the game is concerned. And visually, we were seeing it above, just under where that weird little artifact is. What I need to do now is paint it with the fill tool, or I can paste putty over it. If you saw that tutorial previously, same thing. So fill tool, hit the E key, and I will actually pick a different color so we can see. Now, oops, sorry. Fill tool, E key. And what that's done is made this voxel visible again. Now I'm going to use my tweak mode in my selection tool to select again the voxel that's immediately below that, which is where the game believes that it is. Copy it and paste it, and there, nice and clean, is a microvoxel, but it is like the one we made it from. It is offset. You can see my cursor, get closer to it, my cursor wants to select it there. So by doing that, we can make a whole range of offset voxels of different sizes, which have a number of obscure uses. This is a fairly advanced level tutorial. You don't necessarily need these. But one example would be, because the game thinks this guy is one higher, or one lower than where it really is, if I were to flip that upside down, now the game thinks it's one above where it really is. So I can paste it right adjacent to the ground without causing the ground to pull up, because the game, as far as the game is concerned, that voxel is there. It's not adjacent to the ground. So the game does not see any reason why the ground voxel needs to meet the side of this voxel. So you can get some interesting effects that way. You can also make offset microvoxel strings, and again, there's a few ways to do this, but one way, there's usually many ways to do anything in Landmark. One way is to just stack and smooth. Oops. So there I have just a square with an empty hollow in the middle. I'm going to copy it into a stack, maybe 6 or 7 high, something like that. And then I'm going to smooth the middle section. Smooth that a couple times. Now what happens if I use my fill tool, E, click, if I copy that section out, oops, and I do keep needing to remember to float it above the ground, you can see what that fill tool did was it painted in the middle hollow. So that's now a solid voxel, which I can copy out. And there is a still offset microvoxel peg type shape, which you may need to use tweak mode to select, but that's where the game believes it is, and visually we see it right above. So again, you can use a variety of gentle smooths on this shape to create a whole selection of shapes and thinnesses of these. And these are really useful if you want to stick, for example, a peg into a curved shape, like to make the spoke of a wheel, or a peg coming out of a rounded wall, because the game thinks it is here. If your curved wall was up here, there would be no artifacting at all. Again, fairly advanced technique, not something that you really need, but it allows you to do some cool tricks. And over here, what I've done is, as I went through and I did those more gentle smooths in the past, I just stuck each size, floated out one voxel from this wall, just so if I ever want them, I don't have to go through and make them again. Then I can pick any size that I want and do whatever I want with it. The other thing you can do with these offset pegs, and these ones are actually above where they look in the wall. Oops, so a little tricky to select. There we go. So I'll select this one. If I were to paste these, oops, I'll start a new area here. Okay. If I were to paste these like this, and just go around the outside in a big square. Now let's see, switch colors and paint the middle here. I'm making interesting offset voxel shapes. Let me just go back here and repaste over the corners. Oops, I'm going to use tweak mode here, because it can be difficult to see the perspective of where exactly you are. All right, there we go. So I'm going to repaste those over the corners. Copy this middle one out. I now have an offset megavoxel. So it's still offset. The game still thinks it's one off from where visually it appears to be, but it's stretched extra big, so I can do some cool stuff with those two if I wanted to. Such as, here is a round shape. Here is my offset voxel. I can paste it right on top of that without any distortion, because the game really thinks it's up here. So that is offset voxels. Very, very quick tutorial intro. There's lots more complicated things you can do with them, but that's how to make them. That's what they are, and that's how to construct a little wall like this if you think you're going to use them again. You can also find these in most swap meets if you don't want to do this all yourself. But I always think it's useful to just understand how they happen. Thanks for joining. So if you just hopped into the stream, I am